And welcome! This is Brandy Rose Smith, live in the Forbidden Library. Stuck as a potato still, cause that's what happened. I remember last time when I got turned into this potato, my internet wasn't that great. So I can, if necessary, I can replay that little bit so people can be informed. I need to make a video or a clip of it. But today, we're reading more Pride and Prejudice. It's been 3 weeks since we've read Pride and Prejudice, bro. 3 weeks! I was saying that today, like, what were we up to? But I figured it out. Elizabeth's sister ran off with Mr. Wickerton. No, not Mr. Wick. That's I've been working far too much on Granny and Baba Yaga. Hello everyone! Hello Jake the 13th. Jake 13th squared, technically, I think, now. Back by popular demand, he's been helping a Victorian class sass from everyone's favourite northern lass, Brandy Rose Smith. Yeah! Hello Luke! I'm good. The tea fairies are helping me with their magic due to my lack of hands. So that's how I'm able to continue streaming. But other than that, I'm okay. We're surviving as a potato. Hi, and you'll be back soon, okie dokie. More like Brady Rose chips, am I right? But what kind of chips you on about? American chips or British chips? I have thought about getting, maybe if I cook too much, like if my brain overheats too much in like Ruiner or Elden Ring, I hope I don't cook my potato into any other form. That might be painful, and I'd be even more, appetizing. So at least in this form, no one wants to eat a raw potato, right? No one's weird enough here to pick up a potato and just start eating it like an apple, right? I hope so. I know some people do that with tomatoes because they're mad lads. But, oh wait, I forgot. I don't have my glasses on. I can still wear my glasses. Obviously, I was doing American, but it'd be Franny Rose Smith. Yeah. Chips! Chippy Rose Smith. Chippy Chip Rose Smith. Chips and gravy Rose Smith. Chips and cheese Rose Smith. Chippy. Or mash. I don't know if I'd rather be mashed potato. And there's so many wonderful things a potato can be. I could be a tasty roast potato. That would be great. You'd have to boil me first. I could be... Boiled potato is probably the worst kind of potato you can be, though, let's be honest. At least I need to sprinkle some oregano on my tomatoes before I eat them. You still eat them raw, though! Oh, I can't stand a raw tomato. Cannot do it. Bleh. Potatoes all the way. Anyway, I will attempt. Oh, wait a second. It's Sunday. Do you know what I haven't done on a Sunday in a very, 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 very long time? Is we haven't caught up with what I've been reading. My Books Until Freedom is a number that can go down, but I just haven't been keeping up with it. Let me get the spreadsheet. We have some spreadsheeting to do before we read. The most thrilling of content you could ever imagine. The spreadsheet. Let me get the spreadsheet. Da, 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 da. Spreadsheet. Okay, what have I been reading? What have I been doing? So I read... Did I put my holiday books in? No, I haven't put anything in for a while. Okay. Well, shite. I need to, here they are. Here's the 2 books I've been reading recently that I read on holiday. Spread them sheets. Oh, heck yeah. So 152nd book is, I don't think I read this first. I didn't read this first. I read this one first. Which is did I add them? Oh no, I did add them. Okay, cool. Those are the ones I read on holiday. So we have added them, but I have been reading more webtoons. I have indeed been reading my webtoons. Let me check where I'm up to in my webtoons. Because I read, you'll notice higher up there is webtoon. Give me my webtoon now. There we go. Higher up we have Manhwa, Not Abandoned Empress, Gently Raised Beast. And I started reading that on the app instead. So I have finished Gently Raised Beast now. So where did I start that and how many chapters did I do? Because every 20 chapters I can add it onto the spreadsheet. Ah, it's Friday, Rosesmith, it is. I'm not fried yet. I have not cooked enough to be fried. So I've gone from episode 25. I might have to get a calculator out. So episode 25 is where I started. And it ended at episode 29. No, 93. Why did I say 29? So it'd be 93 take 25 divided by 20. So that's about 3 book equivalents in my Gently Raised Beast. Gently Raised Beast. Webtoon. Who did this one? Early Flower Anios, and it is a series, but it's a series I have completed! And I had to do 3 of those, so boop, 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 boop. Alright, I'll get my deep fried fried potato and brownie fries. No! No brownie fries, no brownie fries, no brownie fries. I don't know. I haven't decided what kind of potato I want to be yet. Why must you push one certain kind of potato on me? I will not fit into your boxes. I will be the potato I wish to be. Really the best kind of potato. The potato that really gets everyone excited is the roast potato in the goose fat. That is the best kind of potato. Heck yeah, Maiden, I'll make some burgers to go with it. No! No! Put me on a roast dinner! I deserve to be on a roast dinner! Roast potato. You get a look, Luke. Have a lovely look. Have a nice chill time. Have I read enough of this webtoon to have a whole thing? Yes, I have. So another one I've been reading recently is The Charming Duke of the North. And that's been very nice. It's so pretty. And he's a pretty white-haired man. And she's a very pretty lady. And everything's pretty. And it's great. And it's by someone called Gachunga. And where's my and? Where's my fancy and? I want to put the fancy and on. Fancy and! There it is. British reference. I'm a walking British reference. Never had that, but it sounds good. Ah, roast dinner. I think Americans, you guys have roast dinner for your Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving dinner is roast dinner. And Stardust Via. I'm not Irish. Do not turn me into vodka. I say. Wait, what if we the power of the stream using Brady as a potato battery? I would not be a very powerful potato battery. It's probably not very wise. I've also read at least 3 things of 106 of the Wayne Family Adventures. Wait, no, we have to do the full. So, Batman, Wayne Family Adventures, which is also a webtoon, and it's by CRC Payne and Starbite. You charge your phone using battery burning now. Now that's a sight to behold. Brownie Potato Smith, long time no see. Hope you've been well. I've been doing very well, thank you. Rick, how'd you get? Yeah, I got turned into a potato for Halloween. I can show you the clip in which it happened. 1, 5, 8. I think that's what we're up to. Make sure I haven't made any mistakes, because that'll kick me in the butt. Yeah, when I was often stressed, I found a weird sussy self-help book in the library, and I read the last few lines that may have been in Latin on the last stream at the end, and then poof. Yes, this is Excel. This is how I've been keeping track of my books. Got some eggs and bacon and what hash browns? Yeah! Oh, hash browns is a pretty good potato form, to be fair. I think that's it. I haven't really been reading many books recently, but webtoons, I'm pretty on the webtoons right now. Okay. Oh no, do you know what should count? Last stream, we spent like at least a good hour or so to probably half an hour reading Sonic OC trading cards. I think that should count as at least one book, so I'm adding that too. 159. Sonic OC trading cards. Cards. Many people. Single cards, bro. There we go. They're definitely counted. There was a lot of text I read on that one. Okay, so that is 10,000 minus 159, which takes us to 9,841. So let's quickly update that. 41. We just took away 9. Wonderful. Okay. We're done. What? Oh Christ, no. Oh God, what have I missed in the chat? Excel's the backbone of the world. Correct. We use Excel to see how long it'll take us to get money for Japan. Fair. You know you should use protection while reading. Did no one educate you on the danger of unprotected reading? I know. I should have. What came to my brain after reading a weird passage out loud was the Mummy movie. You know, when Evie's just reading the passage aloud that wakes up the mummy, because why would you read it out loud? You should not be reading weird things out loud. But I forgot in that moment, and then I said the magic word 5 times, and now I am attempting to research a way to get my body back, but it might be a little while. Maybe I'll need your help. I haven't quite figured it out yet, so I will let you know. Tut tut tut. I thought you were a reading VTuber. Don't skip until the Latin lines. That'll cause you to be. I read it while I was off. It helped me with my stress. Of course, Sonic OC trading cards should be on every secondary school curriculum. Yes, they should. Got to the point. Sonic's best. I don't have hands, but the tea fairies have like magic telepathy, and they're helping me out with most of the things. They have lent me some of their power, so I can just about get on with my life right now. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. It's not powerful not telepathy. Telekinesis, that's it, not telepathy. It's not powerful, but, you know, it gets me done. Somewhere New Look is unhappy as an onion. I think New Look's fucking thrilled, unfortunately. Would you like to see the cover of that stupid book that made me this way? If you missed it last time, I will give it to you again. Where is it? There it is. It's gonna be huge. 1 second. This is another reason why I'm an idiot. But maybe why I became a potato more than anything else. This was the cover of the book. Would New Look like to meet you? Probably not. You are probably an insignificant speck in her world. You do not matter to her. Not much does. She just wanted my viewers to support her. This was the book. Becoming Your True Self. Super amazing self-help book that is totally not sus by a badly scribbled Newlock. You're the queen? Well, she's an outworld god of magic, so what's a queen to a god? That old fucking Tumblr post. Also, Newlock seems like the average. Newlock seems like the average Northern. She definitely wouldn't be very average. She would not like to be called average, but she cannot get to me. Yes, unfortunately. She might not be able to get to me anymore, but, you know, she can evidently sneak things over by the looks of it. What's a god to a potato? Nothing! No god can stop a potato! Luckily, I can still drink tea as a potato. Otherwise, I think I would die. Maybe it's boiling my insides. Maybe my insides are already mashed potato. But I don't care, because I need to drink tea to live. Otherwise, I would die. But anyway. We've yapped for 20 minutes. Shall we get on with the plot? Plot, 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 plot. Anyway, so I will attempt to give some kind of recap for 75% of Pride and Prejudice. I will not be able to give you a good recap because it has been 3 weeks since I have so much as looked at this book. So I might be as lost as you are. But I'm sure we'll remember as we go. It'll be fine, you're wheezing. I'm a potato. How could you defeat a potato? What is intoxicating innocence? Shame on you, sweet Newlock. I'm gonna make you a PNG of mashed briny. No, not the mash. But mashed potato is great. I love mashed potato. It makes me happy. It makes me happy because it's one of my dad's favorites. And so it always reminds me of my dad. And then I got happy because I'm like, oh, Dad likes this. And then I'm happy. Anyway, that's stupid. Anyway, me. Pride and Prejudice. So, Pride and Prejudice has a lot of shit happen. So much has happened. There's so much drama. There's so much sass. But what we're interested in is the relationship between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. There has been some ups, there has been some downs. Mr. Darcy has proposed to Miss Elizabeth, but Miss Elizabeth has turned him down for many a reason, one of them being that he advised his friend against marrying her sister when her sister was deeply in love with his friend. He also did some bad things to a man, and he also is a bit of a snob, really. Mashed potato and my nan's gravy, goddamn meal. Yeah. But it seems that he was mean to this man because this man was a bit of a doo-doo head, and this doo-doo head of a man did try to marry his sister in vengeance for something that Mr. Darcy actually quite rightfully did. Luckily, they managed to save Mr. Darcy's sister from eloping with such a man. However, Elizabeth has come home after learning the truth of the matter and learning about Mr. Darcy's point of view, and you know what, actually thinking it's quite reasonable in the end. Only to find that her sister has also eloped with such a man. And this is terrible. He's a scoundrel. And it is weird because he's a bit of a gold digger and her sister has nothing really to offer. He's gay? No, he's not gay. And yeah, so that's bad. This is bad. That's about it. I think that's all I've got. We'll recap more as we go. He's a coward, bully, cad, and a thief. He is. And a doo-doo head, yeah. 100%. Let's get into it, shall we? Adjust the glasses and go. This is a most unfortunate affair, and will probably be much talked of. But we must stem the tide of malice and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly consolation. And then received Then, perceiving in Elizabeth no inclination of replying, she added, "Unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we may draw from it this useful lesson, that loss of virtue in a female is irresistible, that one false step involves her endless ruin, that her reputation is no less brittle than it is beautiful, and that she cannot be too guarded in her behaviour towards the undeserving of the opposite sex." Elizabeth lifted her eyes in amazement, but was much too oppressed to make any reply. Mary, however, continued to console her with such kind of moral extractions from the evil before them. In the afternoon, the two elder Bennets were able to be for half an hour by themselves, and Elizabeth instantly availed herself of the opportunity of making any inquiries which Jane was equally eager to satisfy. After joining in general lamentations over the dreadful sequel of this event, which Elizabeth considered as all but certain, and Miss Bennet could not assert to be wholly impossible, the former continued the subject by saying, "But tell me all and everything about it which I have not already heard. Give me further particulars. What did Colonel Foster say? Had they no apprehension of anything before the elopement took place? They must have seen them together for ever." Colonel Foster did own that he had often suspected some partiality. GLaDOS. Hello. This is a test to see if you can understand the English language. This is a threatening and lethal test, and you will be destroyed by lasers should you not understand. No less brittle than a well-cooked potato. They had no apprehension of anything before the elopement took place. They must have seen them together for ever. Colonel Foster did own that he had often suspected some partiality, especially on Lydia's side, but nothing gave him any alarm. I am so grieved for him. His behaviour was attentive and kind to the utmost. He was coming to us in order to assure us of his concerns, before he had any idea their not being gone to Scotland. When that apprehension first got aboard, it hastened his journey. And was Denny convinced that Wickham would not marry? Did he know of their intending to go off? Had Colonel Foster seen Denny himself? Yes, but when questioned by him, Denny denied knowing anything of their plan, and would not give his real opinion about it. He did not repeat his persuasion of their not marrying. From that, I am inclined to hope he might have been misunderstood before. Until Colonel Foster came himself, not one of you entertained a doubt, I suppose, of their being really married? How is it possible that such an idea should enter our brains? I feel a little uneasy, a little fearful of my sister's happiness with him in marriage, because I knew that his conduct had not been always quite right. My father and mother knew nothing of that. They only felt how imprudent a match it must be. Kitty then owned with a small natural triumph on knowing, more than the rest of us, that in Lydia's last letter she had prepared her for such a step. She had known, it seems, of their being in love with each other many weeks. Oh my. But not before they went to Brighton? No, I believe not. And did Colonel Foster appear to think ill of Wickham himself? Does he know his real character? I must confess that he did not speak so well of Wickham as he formerly did. He believed him to be imprudent and extravagant, and since this sad affair has taken place, it is said that he left Merton greatly in debt. I hope this may be false. Oh, Jane, had we been less strict, less secret, had we told what we knew of him, this could not have happened. Perhaps it would have been better, replied her sister, but to expose the former faults of any person without knowing what their present feelings were seems unjustifiable. We acted with the best intentions. Could Colonel Forster repeat the particulars of Lydia's notes to his wife? He brought it with him for us to see. Jane then took it from her pocket and gave it to Elizabeth. These were the contents. My dear Harriet, you will laugh when you know where I am gone, and I cannot help laughing myself at your surprise tomorrow morning, as soon as I am missed. I am going to Greta Green, and if you cannot guess with who, I shall think you are a simpleton, for there is no man in the world I love, and he is an angel. I should never be happy without him. So think it no harm to be off. You need not send them word Longbourn of my going, if you do not like it, for it will make the surprise the greater when I write to them, and sign my name Lydia Wickham. No! No! Lydia! Ugh, what a joke it will be. Ah, yes, let's go elope with my husband and then send a letter to my family with my married name. Oh my God, Lydia. Lydia, sweetie. Elope. It means to run away and get married. Yes, she's going to elope with this man. I can hardly write for laughing. Pray make my excuses for Pratt. Pray make my excuses to Pratt for not keeping my engagement and dancing with him tonight. Tell him I hope he will excuse me when he knows all, and tell him I will dance with him at the next ball we meet with great pleasure. I shall send for my clothes when I get to Longbourn, but I wish you would tell Sally to mend a great slit in my worked muslin gown before they are packed up. Goodbye. Give my love to Colonel Forster. I hope you will drink to our good journey. Your affectionate friend, Lydia Bennet. Oh, thoughtless Lydia, cried Elizabeth when she had finished it. What a letter is this, to be written at such a moment! But at least it shows that she was serious in the object of her journey. Whatever he might afterwards persuade her to do, it was not on her side of a scheme of infamy. Oh, my poor father, how he must have felt! I never saw anyone so shocked. He could not speak a word for full 10 minutes. My mother was taken ill immediately, and the whole house in such confusion. Oh, Jane, cried Elizabeth, was there a servant belonging to it who did not know the whole story before the end of the day? I do not know. I hope there was, but to be guarded at such a time is very difficult. My mother was in hysterics, and though I endeavoured to give her every assistance in my power, I'm afraid I did not do so much as I might have done. But the horror of what might possibly happen almost took from me my faculties. Anyone else get the feeling Brian needs Mrs. Potato Cake? Pin the glasses on the potato. Your attendance upon her has been too much for you. You do not look well. Oh, that I had been with you. You have had every care and anxiety upon yourself alone. Mary and Kitty have been very kind, and would have shared in every fatigue, I am sure, but I did not think it right for either of them. Kitty is slight and delicate, and Mary studies so much that her hours of repose should not be broken in on. My Aunt Phillips came to Longbourn on Tuesday, after my father went away, and was so good as to stay till Thursday with me. She was of great use and comfort to us all, and Lady Lucas has been very kind. She walked here on Wednesday morning to console with us, and offered her services, or any of her daughters, if they could be of use to us. Oh, that's lovely. Everyone's pitching in for them. drink some tea. Yes, we did, Scarlet Silver Ryan. It's the same books. Divergent, Hunger Games, all that good stuff. We definitely had those too. She had better have stayed at home, cried Elizabeth. Perhaps she meant well, but under a misfortune as this, one cannot see too little of one's neighbours. Assistance is impossible. Condolence insufferable. Let them triumph over us at a distance and be satisfied. No! Oh, God. Elizabeth has exactly the opposite thought I had of that, so... I don't think the way she do. She then proceeded to inquire into the measures which her father had intended to pursue while in town for the recovery of his daughter. I meant, I believe, replied Jane, to go to Epsom, the place where they last changed horses, see the postilions? I take it that's like the people who look after horses, and try if anything could be made out from them. His principal object must be to discover the number of the hackney coach which took them from Clapham. It had come with a fare from North London, and as though the circumstances of a gentleman and lady's removing from one carriage into another might be remarked. He meant to take inquiries at Clapham. If he had before set down his fare, he determined to make inquiries there, and hoped it might not be possible to find out the stand and number of the coach. I do not know if any other designs that he had formed, but he was in such a hurry to be gone, and his spirits so greatly discomposed, that I had difficulty finding out even so much as this. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, there he goes, discomposed. The post. Da, da, da. The whole party were in hopes of a letter from Mr. Bennet the next morning, but the post came without bringing a single line from him. His family knew him to be, on all common occasions, a most diligent and dilatory correspondent, but at such a time they had hoped for exertion. They were forced to conclude that he had no pleasing intelligence to send, but even if that, they would have been glad to be certain. Mr. Gardiner had waited only for the letters before he set off. When he was gone, they were certain, at least, of receiving constant information of what was going on, and their uncle promised, at parting, to prevail on Mr. Bennet to return to Longbourn as soon as he could, to the great consolation of his sister, who considered it as the only security for her husband's not being killed in a duel. I think Mrs. Bennet is being so dramatic again. Mrs. Gardiner and the children were to remain in Hertfordshire a few days longer, as the former thought her presence might be serviceable to her nieces. She shared in their attendance on Mrs. Bennet, and was a great comfort to them in their hours of freedom. Their other aunt also visited them frequently, and always, as said she, with the designs of cheering and heartening them up, though, as she never came without reporting some fresh instance of Wickham's extravagance or irregularity, she seldom went away without leaving them more dispirited than she found them. All Meryton seemed striving to blacken the man who, but 3 months before, had been almost an angel of light. He was declared to be in debt to every tradesman in the place, and his intrigues, all honoured with the title of seduction, had been extended into every tradesman's family. Everyone declared that he was the wickedest young man in the world, and everybody began to find out that they had always distrusted the appearance of his goodness. Elizabeth, though she did not credit above half of what was said, believed enough to make her former assurance of her sister's ruin still more certain, and even Jane, who still believed less of it, became almost hopeless, more especially as the time was now come, when if they had gone to Scotland, which she had never before entirely despaired of, they must, in all probability, have gained some news of them. Mr. Gardiner left Longbourn on Sunday. On Tuesday his wife received a letter from him. It told them that on his arrival he had immediately found out his brother, and persuaded him to come to Gracechurch Street, that Mr. Bennet had been to Epsom and Clapham before his arrival, but without gaining any satisfactory information, and that he was now determined to inquire at all the principal hotels in town, as Mr. Bennet, though it was possible they might have gone to one of them on their first coming to London. Before they procured lodgings, Mr. Gardiner himself did not expect any success from this measure, but as his brother was eager in it, he meant to assist him in pursuing it. He added that Mr. Bennet seemed wholly disinclined at present to leave London, and promised to write again very soon. There was also a postscript to this effect. I have written to Colonel Foster to desire him to find out, if possible, from some of the young man's intimates in the regiment, whether Wickham has any relations or connections who could likely to know in what part of the town he has now concealed himself, if there were anyone that could apply to, with a probability of gaining such a clue as that. It might be of essential consequence. At present we have nothing to guide us. Colonel Foster will, I dare say, do everything in his power to satisfy us on his head, but, on second thoughts, perhaps Lizzie could tell us what relations he has now living better than any other person. Elizabeth was at no loss to understand from whence this defiance for her authority proceeded, but it was not in her power to give any information of so satisfactory a nature as the compliment deserved. She had never heard of his having any relations except a father and mother, both of whom had been dead many years. It was possible, however, that some of his companions in the Shire might be able to give more information, and though she was not very sanguine in expecting it, the application was a something. That feels so wrong to say. Was a something to look forward to. God damn it. You know when I always talk about those rules of grammar that change over the years, and now when you read this, it doesn't feel right, but it probably was at the time. Was a something definitely feels so wrong to say. To look forward to. Every day at Longbourn was now a day of anxiety. But the most anxious part of each was when the post was expected. The arrival of letters was the first grand object of every morning's impatience. Through letters, whatever good or bad was to be told would be communicated, and every succeeding day was expected to bring some news of importance. But before they heard again from Mr. Gardiner, a letter arrived from their father. For their father, from a different quarter, from Mr. Collins, which, as Jane had received directions to open all that came for him in his absence, she accordingly read, and Elizabeth, who knew what curiosities his letters were, looked over and read likewise, as it follows. God, Mr. Collins, and his paragraphs. My dear sir, I feel myself called upon by our relationship and my situation in life to condole with you on the grievous affliction you are now suffering under, of which we were yesterday informed by a letter from Hertfordshire. Be assured, my dear sir, that Mrs. Collins and myself sincerely sympathise with you and all your respectable family in your present distress, which must be of the bitterest kind, because proceeding from a cause which no time can remove, no argument shall be wanting on my part that can alleviate so severe a misfortune, or that may comfort you under a circumstance that must be, of all others, most afflicting to a parent's mind. The death of your daughter would have been a blessing in comparison of this, and it is the more to be lambasted, because there is a reason to suppose, as my dear Charlotte informs me, that this licentious behaviour in your daughter has proceeded from a faulty degree of indulgence. Oh my God. Mr. Collins, you have no tact! Yes. I heard about your daughter. What an awful situation she's in. Wouldn't it have been better if she had just died? Oh, I heard this was because you spoiled her. What the fuck? Mr. Collins! Oh my God. I know, right? Though at the same time, for the consolation of yourself and Mr. Bennet, I am inclined to think that her own disposition must be naturally bad, or she could not be guilty of such an enormity as at so early an age. However that may be, you are grievously to be pitied. Ugh. No one wants pity in this situation either. Jesus Christ. In which opinion I am only joined by Mrs. Collins, but likewise by Lady Catherine and her daughter, to whom I have related the affair. Of course you fucking have, you dick. They agree with me in apprehending that this false step in one daughter will be injurious to the fortunes of all the others. Oh yes, and this shitty thing that happens is going to be so bad for your family, isn't it? Oh my God, Mr. Collins, Jesus Christ. For who, as Lady Catherine herself condescendingly says, will connect themselves with such a family? And this consideration leads me, moreover, to reflect with augmented dissatisfaction on a certain event of last November. For, had it been otherwise, I must have been involved in all your sorrow and disgrace. Oh my God. Let me advise you, then, my dear sir, to console yourself as much as possible, to throw off your unworthy child from your affection for ever, and leave her to reap the fruits of her own heinous offence. Jesus Christ. I cannot. That is so heartless. Let me summarize this again for us. So, dear sir, I heard about the crap you're going through. Your daughter is a disgrace. Wouldn't it be better if she was dead? I pity you and your situation. I hear it's because you spoiled her. Wouldn't it be great? My advice is that you should just disown her and let her do her thing. Otherwise, it will reflect badly on you and your family. And this, on a certain event that happened last November. Basically what he's saying there is, I'm so glad Elizabeth didn't marry me and I didn't marry into your family so that I'm not actually involved in this situation. Jesus Christ. Mr. Collins, you heartless bastard. Mr. Gardiner did not fret again till he had received an answer from Colonel Foster, and then he had nothing of pleasant nature to send. It was not known that Wickham had a single relation with whom he kept up any connection, and it was certain that he had no near one living. His former acquaintance had been numerous, but since he had been in the militia, it had not appeared that he was on terms of particular friendship with any of them. There was no one, therefore, who could be pointed out as likely to give any news of him. and in the wretched state of his own finances, there was a very powerful motive for secrecy, in addition to his fear of discovery by Lydia's relations. For it had just transpired that he had left gambling debts behind him to a very considerable amount. Colonel Foster believed that more than £1,000 would be necessary to clear his expenses at Brighton. He owed a good deal in the town, but his debts of honour were still more formidable. Mr. Gardiner did not attempt to conceal these particulars from the Longbourn family. Jane heard them with horror. "A gamester!" she cried. "This is wholly unexpected. I had not an idea of it." Fucking gamers, bro. He spent all his money on waifus. Ye old gacha gamer. No, that's not gacha gamer. It's just straight up gambling, but, you know. We should all be gamesters. That sounds like should be a new cool term for gamers. We're gamesters now. Mr. Gardiner added in his letter that they might expect to see their father at home the following day, which was Saturday. Rendered spiritless by the ill success of all their endeavours, he had yielded to his brother-in-law's entreaty that he would return to his family, and leave it to him to do whatever occasion might suggest to be advisable for continuing their pursuit. When Mrs. Bennet was told of this, she did not express so much satisfaction as her children expected, considering that what her anxiety for his life had been before. The classic problem comes around again for the landed families. Gambling debts. They really need to lay off the gacha, but you can get Barbara and Noelle for free. You don't even need that many perks. You don't. I got the newest lady, and I just haven't rolled on any for a while because I wasn't really interested in the main lot. But I only rolled 20 on the recent banner, and I got it. I was so happy. Yeah, pretty cat lady. Anyway, don't get me started on Genshin. Don't get me started on Genshin. I'm already traumatized from the war. Anyway. What? He's coming home? And without poor Lydia? She cried. Sure he will not leave Longbourn before he has found them. Who is to fight Wickham and make him marry her if he comes away? Jesus. Mrs. Bennet, you're the worst mum I've ever read. Jesus Christ. There are not many fictional mothers worse than you right now. I know Agatha all along is a TV show right now, but no, she's still doing better than fucking Mrs. Bennet right now. As Mrs. Gardiner began to wish to be home, it was settled that she and her children should go to London at the same time that Mr. Bennet came from it. The coach, therefore, took them the first stage of their journey, and brought its master back to Longbourn. Mrs. Gardiner went away in all perplexity about Elizabeth and her Derbyshire friend, that had attended her from part of the world. His name had never been voluntarily mentioned before them by her niece, and the kind of half-expectation which Mrs. Gardiner had formed of their being followed by a letter from him had ended in nothing. Elizabeth had received none since her return that could come from Pemberley. The present unhappy state of the family rendered any other excuse for the lowness of her spirits unnecessary. Nothing, therefore, could be fairly conjectured from that, though Elizabeth, who was by this time intolerably well acquainted with her own feelings, was perfectly aware that had she known nothing of Darcy, she could have borne the dread of Lydia's infamy somewhat better. It would have spared her, she thought, one sleepless night or two. When Mr. Bennet arrived, he had all the appearance of his usual philosophic composure. He said as little as he had ever been in the habit of saying, made no mention of the business that had taken him away, and it was some time before his daughters had the courage to speak of it. It was not till the afternoon, when he joined them at tea, that Elizabeth ventured to introduce the subject, And then, on her briefly expressing her sorrow for what he must have endured, he replied, "Say nothing of that. Who should suffer but myself? It has been my own doing, and I ought to feel it." Yeah, in Agatha all along, they're talking about the TV show that's going on right now. And they keep talking about Agatha's son and how she may have murdered him to get the Darkhold originally. But she seems to really regret something. There's some baby issues going on with Agatha at the moment. I recommend the TV show. It's really cool at the moment. I've been having a lot of fun. It's all witchy and fun and very, very gay. Incredibly gay. Incredibly lesbian. It was not till the afternoon, when he joined them at tea, that Elizabeth ventured to... Oh, yeah, I just read that bit. "You must not be too severe upon yourself," replied Elizabeth. You may as well warn me against such an evil. Human nature is prone to fall to it. No, Lizzie, let me once in my life feel how much I have been to blame. I am not afraid of being overpowered by the impression. It will not pass away soon enough. Do you suppose them to be in London? Yes. Where else can they be so well concealed? And Lydia used to want to go to London, added Kitty. She is happy then, said her father dryly, and her residence there will probably be of some duration. Then, after a short silence, he continued, Lizzie, I bear you no ill will for being justified in your advice to me last May. Oh yeah, because Elizabeth was like, don't let our daughter go to Brighton on her own with all those men that are definitely going to take advantage of her. And he was like, oh, it's fine. Colonel Foster will look after her. Nah. So that's why he's beating himself up. It's not Lizzie's fault, but he remembers Lizzie's words and Lizzie's warning. And he's like, why didn't I listen? Which, considering the event, shows some greatness of mind. They were interrupted by Miss Bennet, who came to fetch her mother's tea. This is a parade, he cried, which does one good. It gives such an elegance to misfortune. Another day I will do the same. I will sit in my library, in my nightcap and powdering gown, and give it as much trouble as I can. Or perhaps I may defer it till Kitty runs away. I'm not going to run away, Papa, said Kitty fretfully. If I should ever go to Brighton, I would behave better than Lydia. You go to Brighton? I would not trust you near it, I would not trust you so near as Eastbourne for £50. No, Kitty, I have at least learned to be cautious, and if you feel the effects of it, no officer is ever to enter my house again, nor even pass through the village. Balls will be absolutely prohibited unless you stand up with one of your sisters, and you are never to stir out of doors till you can prove that you have spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner. No horny pads for you. Kitty took all these threats in a serious light, began to cry. Well, said he, do not make yourself unhappy. If you are a good girl for the next 10 years, I will make you to review at the end of them. I'm gonna lock you up because your sister's been like this. And he's joking. He's joking because Mr. Bennet is a cruel man. 2 days after Mr. Bennet's return, as Jane and Elizabeth were walking together in the shrubbery behind the house, they saw the housekeeper coming towards them, and concluding that she came to call them to their mother, went forward to meet her. But instead of the expected summons, when they approached, she said to Miss Bennet, I beg your pardon, madam, for interrupting you, but I was in hopes you might have got some good news from town. I took the liberty of coming to ask. What do you mean, Hill? We have heard nothing from town. Dear madam, cried Mrs. Hill in great astonishment, don't you know there is an express come for master from Mr. Gardner? He has been here this half hour, and master has a letter. Ooh. 10 years, yep. 10 years, and then maybe he'll let them up the house again. Away ran the girls, too eager to get in to have time for speech. They ran through the vestibule into the breakfast room, from thence to the library. Their father was in neither, and they were on the point of seeking him upstairs with their mother when they were met by the butler, who said, "If you are looking for my master, ma'am, he is walking towards the little copse." Upon this information, they instantly passed through the hall once more, and ran across the lawn after their father, who was deliberately pursuing his way towards a small wood on the side of the paddock. Jane, who was not so light, nor so much in the habit of running as Elizabeth, soon lagged behind, while her sister, panting for breath, came up with him, and eagerly cried out, "Oh, papa! What news? What news? Have you heard from my uncle?" Again, the whole my uncle thing. It's so funny. If I said to my brother, "My mum did this," it doesn't sound like we're talking about, like, I'm talking about my mum, not his mum, even though it's the same mum. I always think that's fascinating. I love the way they talk. "Yes, I have a letter from him by express." "Well, and what news does it bring? Good or bad?" "What is there of good news to be expected?" said he, taking the letter from his pocket. "But perhaps you would like to read it." Elizabeth impatiently caught it from his hand. Jane now came up. "Read it aloud," said their father, "for I hardly know myself what it is about. Gracechurch Street, Monday, August 2nd. My dear brother, at last I am able to send you some tidings of my niece, and such as, upon the whole, I hope will give you satisfaction. Soon after you left me on Saturday, I was fortunate enough to find out in what part of London they were. The particulars I reserve till we meet. It is enough to know they are discovered. I have seen them both." Papa! Papa, we must read the letter! "Then it is, as I always hoped," cried Jane. "They are married." Elizabeth read on. "I have seen them both. They are not married, nor can I find there was any intention of being so. But if you are willing to perform the engagements which I have ventured to make on your side, I hope it will not be long before they are." Why do they hope? I don't understand. I think is this a Victorian thing? I am too modern to understand as to why they want them to be married. I thought they didn't want them to be married, or is this a, like, they've ran away together, so it's better they get married, otherwise everyone's gonna talk about it kind of issue? I don't know. I thought this was bad, but people want them to be married and I don't understand. I'm too modern to understand this. "All that is required of you is to assure your daughter by settlement her equal share of £5,000 secured among your children after the decease of yourself and my sister, and moreover you enter into an engagement of allowing her during your life £100 per annum. These are conditions which, considering everything, I had no hesitation in complying with. As far as I thought myself privileged for you, I shall send this by express, that no time may be lost in bringing me your answer. You will easily comprehend from these particulars that Mr. Wickham's circumstances are not so hopeless as they are generally believed to be. The word has been deceived in that respect, and I am happy to say there will be some little money, even when all his debts are discharged, to settle on my niece." Okay, no, I think he's been a little bit swindled by our smooth-talking, 10 out of 10 charisma Mr. Wickham. In addition to her own fortune, if I shall conclude will be the case, you send me full powers to act in your name throughout the whole of this business. I will immediately give directions to Haggerston for prepping a proper settlement. There will not be the smallest occasion for your coming to town again. Therefore, stay quietly in Longbourn, and depend upon my diligence and care. Send back your answer as soon as you can, and be careful to write explicitly. We have judged it best that my niece should be married from his house, which I would hope you will approve. She comes to us today. I shall write you again as soon as anything more is determined. Yours, E.D.W. Gardner. I think if they run away together, they are better off married to legitimize it, to avoid talks about scandal or possible scorn from future prospective partners. Just taking an educated guess. That's probably it. We're too modern to understand that is apparently a good thing, or the best option, which is awful. Luckily, I think Elizabeth is a little modern too. Is it possible? Cried Elizabeth when she had finished. It could be possible that he will marry her? Wickham is not so undeserving, then, as we have thought him, said her sister. My dear father, I congratulate you. And have you answered the letter? Said Elizabeth. No, but I must do so soon. It must be done soon. Most earnestly did she, then entreat him to lose no more time before he wrote. Oh, my dear father, she cried, come back, and write immediately. Consider how important every moment is in such a case. Let me write for you, said Jane, if you dislike the trouble yourself. I dislike it very much, he replied, but it must be done. And so saying, he turned back with them, and walked towards the house. And, may I ask, said Elizabeth, but the terms, I suppose, must be complied with. Complied with? I am only ashamed of his asking so little. And they must marry. Yet he is such a man. Yes, they must marry. There is nothing else to be done. But there are two things that I want very much to know. One is how much money your uncle has laid down to bring it about. And the other is how I am ever to pay him. Money? My uncle? What do you mean, sir? I mean that no man in his proper senses would marry Lydia on so slight a temptation as 100 a year during my life, and 50 after I am gone. That is very true, said Elizabeth, though it had not occurred to me before. His debts to be discharged, and something still to remain. Oh, it must be my uncle's doing. Generous, good man. I am afraid he has distressed himself. A small sum would not do all this. No, said her father, Wickham's a fool if he takes her with a farthing less than £10,000. I should be sorry to think so ill of him in the very beginning of our relationship. £10,000? Heaven forbid! How is half such a sum to be repaid? Mr. Bennet made no answer, and each of them, deep in thought, continued silent till they reached the house. Their father then went to the library to write, and the girls walked into the breakfast-room. And they are really to be married? Cried Elizabeth, as they were by themselves. How strange this is! And for this we are to be thankful? That they should marry? Small as their chance of happiness, and wretched as his character, we are forced to rejoice. Oh, Lydia! I comfort myself with thinking, replied Jane, that he certainly would not marry Lydia if he had not a real regard for her. Though our kind uncle has done something towards clearing him, I cannot believe that £10,000, or anything like it, has been advanced. He has children of his own, and may have more. How could he spare half £10,000? If we were able to learn what Wickham's debts have been, said Elizabeth, and how much is settled on his side on our sister, we shall exactly know what Mr. Gardiner has done for them, because Mr. Wickham has not a sixpence of his own. The kindness of my uncle and aunt can never be requited. Their taking her home, and affording her their personal protection and countenance is such a sacrifice to her advantage as years of gratitude cannot enough acknowledge. By this time she is actually with them. If such good graces does not make her miserable now, she will never deserve to be happy. What a meeting for her when she first sees my aunt. We must endeavour to forget all that has passed on either side, said Jane. I hope and trust they will yet be happy. His consenting to marry her is proof. I will believe that he is come to a right way of thinking. Their mutual affection will steady them, and I flatter myself they will settle so quietly, and live in so rational a manner, as may in time make their past imprudence forgotten. Their conduct has been such, replied Elizabeth, as neither you nor I nor anybody can ever forget. It is useless to talk of it. It now occurred to the girls that their mother was in all likelihood perfectly ignorant of what had happened. They went to the library, therefore, and asked their father whether he would not wish them to make it known to her. He was writing, and without raising his head, coolly replied, "Just as you please. May we take my uncle's letter to read to her? Take whatever you like, and get away." Elizabeth took the letter from his writing table, and they went upstairs together. Mary and Kitty were both with Mrs. Bennet. One communication would, therefore, do for all. After a slight preparation for good news, the letter was read aloud. Mrs. Bennet could hardly contain herself. As soon as Jane had read Mr. Gardiner's hope for Lydia's being soon married, her joy burst forth. She was now in an irritation as violent from delight as she had ever been flighty from alarm and vexation. To know that her daughter would be married was enough. She was disturbed by no fear for her felicity, nor humbled by any remembrance of her misconduct. Jesus Christ, this is why Mrs. Bennet is the worst. Not even a hint of hesitation. Jumping potatoes for any 10,000 in gambling debt in 1813 is how much? £583,000. Jesus Christ. It's more than most houses are worth. God damn. God damn. Buy a few houses with that. Maybe two. Specifically two. Two nice houses. My dear Lydia, she cried. This is delightful indeed. She will be married. I shall see her again. She will be married at 16. My good, kind brother, I knew how it would be. I knew he would manage everything. But how long to see her? And to see dear Wickham, too. But the clothes, the wedding clothes! I will write to my dear sister Gardiner about them directly. Lizzie, my dear, run down to your father and ask him how much he will give her. Stay, I will go myself. Ring the bell, Kitty, for Hill. I will put on my things in the moment. My dear Lydia, how merry we shall be together when we meet. Her eldest daughter endeavoured to give her some relief to the violence of these transports by leading her through the obligations which Mr. Gardiner's behaviour had led them all under. For we must attribute this happiness, she added, in great measure to his kindness. We are persuaded that he has pledged himself to assist Mr. Wickham with money." "Well," cried her mother, "it is all very right. Who should do it but her own uncle? If he had not had a family of his own, I and my children must have had all his money, you know. And it is the first time we have ever had anything from him except a few presents. Well, I am so happy. In a short time I shall have a daughter married. Mrs. Wickham, how well it sounds. And she was only 16 last June. My dear Jane, I am in such a flutter that I am sure I can't write, so I will dictate and you write for me. We will settle with your father about the money afterwards, but the things should be ordered immediately." Jesus Christ. Worst mother ever! Ah, gosh. The yawn invaded. She was then proceeding to all the particulars of calico, muslin, and cambric, and would shortly have dictated some very plentiful orders, had not Jane, thought with some difficulty, persuaded her to wait till her father was at leisure to be consulted. One day's delay, she observed, would be of small importance, and her mother was too happy to be quite so obstinate as usual. Other schemes, too, came to her head. "I will go to Merton," she said, "as soon as I am dressed, and tell the good news to my sister Phillips, and as I come back I can call on Lady Lucas and Mrs. Long. Kitty, run down and order the carriage. An airing would do me a great deal of good, I am sure. Girls, can I do anything for you in Merton? Oh, here comes Hill, my dear Hill. Have you heard of the good news? Miss Lydia is going to be married, and you shall have a bowl of punch to make merry at her wedding." Jesus Christ. Did you know that potatoes are related to tomatoes? By both being plants? Maybe. But one is a root vegetable and one is a fruit. How are they related? Oh boy, punch. Yes. Mrs. Bennet definitely deserves a bowl of punch in the face. That much is true. Mrs. Hill began instantly express her joy. Elizabeth received her congratulations amongst the rest, and then, sick of this folly, took refuge in her own room, that she might think with freedom. Poor Lydia's situation must, at best, be bad enough, but that was no worse. She had need to be thankful. She felt it so, and though, in looking forward, neither rational happiness nor worldly prosperity could be justly expected for her sister, in looking back to what they had feared only 2 hours ago, she felt all the advantages of what they had gained. The spiteful old ladies. Mr. Bennet had very often wished for this period of his life that, instead of spending his whole income, he had laid by an annual sum for the better provisions of his children, of his wife, if she had survived him. He now wished for it more than ever. Had he done his duty in that respect, Lydia need not have been indebted to her uncle for whatever of honour or credit could now be purchased of her. The satisfaction of prevailing on one of the most worthless young men in Great Britain to be her husband might then have rested in its proper place. He was seriously concerned that a cause of so little advantage to anyone could be forwarded at sole expense of his brother-in-law, and he was determined, if possible, to find out the extent of his assistance, and to discharge the obligation as soon as he could. They're both from the Nightshade family. Oh, that's cool. When first Mr. Bennet married, economy was held to be perfectly useless, for, of course, they were to have a son, This son was to join in cutting off the entail as soon as he could be of age, and the widow and younger children would by means be provided for. 5 daughters successfully entered the world, but yet the son was to come, and Mrs. Bennet, for many years after Lydia's birth, had been certain that he would. This event had at last been despaired of, but it was then too late to be saving. Mrs. Bennet had no turn for economy, and her husband's love of independence had alone prevented their exceeding their income. £5,000 was settled by marriage articles on Mrs. Bennet and the children, but in what proportions should be divided amongst the latter depended on the will of the parents. This was one point, with regard to Lydia at least, which was now to be settled, and Mr. Bennet could have no hesitation in acceding to the proposal before him. In terms of grateful acknowledgment for his kindness of his brother, though expressed most concisely, he then delivered on paper his perfect approbation of all that was done, and his willingness to fulfil the engagements that had been made for him. He had never before supposed that, could Wickham be prevailed on to marry his daughter, it would be done with so little inconvenience to himself as by the present arrangement. He would scarcely be £10 a year the loser by the 100 that was paid to them, for that with her board and pocket allowance, and the continual presents in money which passed to her through her mother's hands, Lydia's expenses had been very little within that sum. That would be done with such trifling exertion on his side too, was another very welcome surprise, for his chief wish at present was to have as little trouble in the business as possible. When the first transports of rage which had produced his activity in seeking her were over, he naturally returned to all his former indolence. His letter was soon dispatched, for though diligent in undertaking his business, he was quick in its execution. He begged to know further particulars of what he was indebted to his brother, but was too angry with Lydia to send any message to her. The good news quickly spread through the house, and with proportionate speed through the neighbourhood. It was borne in the latter with decent philosophy. To be sure, it would have been more for the advantage of conversation, had Miss Lydia Bennet come upon the town, or, as the happiest alternative, been secluded from the world in some distant farmhouse. But there was much to be talked of in marrying her, and the good-natured wishes for her well-doing, which had proceeded before from all the spiteful old ladies in Merton, lost but little of their spirit in this change of circumstances, because with such a husband her misery was considered certain. Oh God, everyone's just letting her marry him. Even though they know she'll be miserable. It was a fortnight since Mrs. Bennet had been downstairs, but on this happy day she again took her seat at the head of her table, and in spirits oppressively high. That's a really good way of writing someone being very annoyingly positive. Oppressively high spirits. No sentiment of shame gave damp to her triumph. The marriage of a daughter, which had been the first object of her wishes since Jane was 16, was now on the point of accomplishment, and her thoughts and her words ran wholly on those attendants of eloquent nuptials, fine muslins, and new carriages and servants. She was busily searching through the neighbourhood for a proper situation for her daughter, and without knowing or considering what their income might be, rejected many as deficient in size and importance. Oh, she's such a delusional woman. I don't think she lives in reality. Hay Park might do, she said, if the Goldings would quit it, or the great house at Stoke, if the drawing-room were larger, but Ashworth is too far off. I could not bear to have her 10 miles from me, and as for Purvis Lodge, the attics are all dreadful. Spirits oppressively high, the default state of mourning people. Yes! Her husband allowed her to talk on without interruption while the servants remained, but when they had withdrawn, he said to her, "Mrs. Bennet, before you take any or all of these houses for your son and daughter, let us come to a right understanding. Into one house in this neighbourhood they shall never have admittance. I will not encourage the imprudence of either by receiving them at Longbourn." She's not going to be happy with that. Daddy's disowning. A long dispute followed his declaration, but Mr. Bennet was firm. It soon led to another, and Mrs. Bennet found, with amazement and horror, that her husband would not advance a guinea to buy clothes for his daughter. He protested that she should receive from him no mark of affection whatsoever on the occasion. Mrs. Bennet could hardly comprehend it. That his anger could be carried to such a point of inconceivable resentment as to refuse his daughter a privilege, without which her marriage would scarcely seem valid, exceeding all that she could believe possible. She was more alive to the disgrace which her want of new clothes must reflect on her daughter's nuptials, than to any sense of shame at her eloping and living with Wickham a fortnight before they took place. I see, that's where the problem is. She ran off and lived with him before they got married. I see. That is the Victorian drama that is happening. Elizabeth was now most heartily sorry that she had, from the distress of the moment, been led to make Mr. Darcy acquaintance with their fears for her sister, for since her marriage would so shortly give the proper termination to the elopement, they might hope to conceal its unfavourable beginnings from all those who were not immediately on the spot. She had no fear of its spreading farther, through his means. There were few people on whose secrecy she would have more confidently depended, but at the same time there was no one whose knowledge of a sister's frailty would have mortified her so much. Not, however, from any fear of disadvantage from it individually to herself, for at any rate there seemed a gulf impassable between them. Had Lydia's marriage been concluded on the most honourable terms, it was not to be supposed that Mr. Darcy would connect himself with a family where every other objection would now be added an alliance and relationship of the nearest kind with the man whom he so justifiably scorned. Imagine living with a man years before you were proposed to. I know, right? Not living with them for like 3 years or something before getting proposed to. It's scandalous. Would never do that. Far too proper to do something like that ever. Hang on, I need to tell my fiance that we had a complete scandal on our hands. What would Mr. Darcy think of me? I know, right? She's so into him now. She's just like, oh God, I'm so embarrassed about what my sister's doing. And now I'm going to be related to the man he hates more than anything. How am I ever supposed to be with him? We didn't have very good situations before in this situationship they got going on here. But now it's even worse. Her chances with Darcy are going down the drain as we speak. From such a connection, she could not wonder that he should shrink. The wish of procuring her regard, which she had assured herself of his feelings in Derbyshire, could not, in rational expectation, survive such a blow as this. She was humbled, she was grieved, she repented, though she hardly knew of what. She became jealous of his esteem when she could no longer hope to be benefited by it. She wanted to hear of him when there seemed the last chance of gaining intelligence. She was convinced that she could not have been happy with him when it was no longer likely they should meet. What a triumph for him, as she thought. Could he know that the proposals which she had proudly spurned only 4 months ago would now have been gladly and gratefully received? He was as generous he was as generous, she doubted not, as the most generous of his sex. But while he was mortal, there must be a triumph. She began now to comprehend that he was exactly the man who, in disposition and talents, would most suit her. His understanding and temper, though unlike her own, would have answered all her wishes. It was a union that must have been to the advantage of both. By her ease and liveliness his mind might have been softened, his manners improved, and from his judgment, information, and knowledge of the world, she must have received benefit of greater importance. But no such happy marriage could now teach the admiration multitude what connubial felicity really was. Oh Jesus, that was a sentence. A union of a different tendency, preluding the possibility of the other, was soon to be former in their family. How Wickham and Lydia were to be supported in intolerable independence she could not imagine, but how little of permanent happiness could belong to a couple who were only brought together because their passions were stronger than their virtue, she could easily conjecture. Mr. Gardiner soon wrote again to his brother. To Mr. Bennet's acknowledgments he briefly replied with assurances of his eagerness to promote the welfare of any of his family, and concluded with entreaties that the subject might never be mentioned to him again. The principal purport of his letter was to inform them that Mr. Wickham had resolved on quitting the militia. It was greatly my wish that he do so, he added, as soon as his marriage was fixed on, and I think you will agree with me in considering a removal from that corps as highly advisable, both on his account and my niece's. It is Mr. Wickham's intention to go to the regulars, and among his former friends there are still some who are able and willing to assist him in the army. He has the promise of an ensign in General's so-and-so's regiment, now quartered in the north. It is an advantage to have it so far from this part of the kingdom. He promises fairly, and I hope among different people, where they may each have a character to preserve. They will both be more prudent. I have written to Colonel Foster to inform him of our present agreements, and to request that he satisfy the various creditors of Mr. Wickham in and near Brighton with assurances of speedy payment, for which I have pledged myself. And will you give yourself the trouble of carrying similar assurances to his creditors in Merton, of whom I shall subjoin a list according to his information. He has given in all his debts. I hope, at least, he has not deceived us. Haggerston has our directions, and all will be completed in a week. They will then join his regiment, unless they are first invited to Longbourn, and I understand from Mrs. Gardiner that my niece is very desirous of seeing you all before she leaves the south. She is well, and begs you to be dutifully remembered to you and her mother. Yours, etc., E. Gardiner. Mr. Bennet and his daughters saw all the advantages of Wickham's removal from the so-and-so shire, as clearly as Mr. Gardiner could do. But Mrs. Bennet was not so pleased with it. Of course she's not, because she wanted her daughter to move in next door, basically. But now she's moving to the other side of the country! Lydia's being settled in the north was when she had expected most pleasure and pride in her company, for she had by no means given up her plan on their residing in Hertfordshire. Was a severe disappointment, and, besides, it was such a pity that Lydia should be taken from a regiment where she was acquainted with everybody, and had so many favourites. She was so fond of Mrs. Foster, said she, it would be quite shocking to send her away, and there are several of the young men too that she likes very much. The officers may not be so pleasant in General So-and-so's regiment. His daughter's request, for such it might be considered, of being admitted into her family again before she set off north, received at first an absolute negative. But Jane and Elizabeth, who agreed in wishing, for the sake of their sister's feelings and consequence, that she should be noticed on her marriage by her parents, urged him so earnestly, yet so rationally and so mildly, to receive her and her husband Longbourn as soon as they were married, that he was prevailed on to think as they thought, and act as they wished. And their mother had the satisfaction of knowing that she should be able to show her married daughter in the neighbourhood before she was banished to the north. Banished to the north. Hey, the north ain't that bad. She ain't banished anywhere, I'll be fine. When Mr. Bennet wrote again to his brother, therefore, he sent permission for them to come, and it was settled that as soon as the ceremony was over they should proceed to Longbourn. Elizabeth was surprised, however, that Wickham should consent to such a scheme, and, had she consulted with her own inclination, any meeting with him would have been the last object of her wishes. With an affectionate smile. Their sister's wedding day arrived, and Jane and Elizabeth felt for her probably more than she felt for herself. The carriage was sent to meet them at so-and-so, and they were to return in it by dinner-time. Their arrival was dreaded by the elder Miss Bennets, and Jane more especially, who gave Lydia the feeling which would have attended herself, as she had been the culprit, and was wretched in the thought of what her sister must endure. They came. The family were assembled in the breakfast-room to receive them. Smiles decked the face of Mrs. Bennet, as the carriage drove up to the door. Her husband looked impenetrably grave, her daughters alarmed, anxious, uneasy. Lydia's voice was heard in the vestibule. The door was thrown open, and she ran into the room. Her mother stepped forward and embraced her and welcomed her with rapture, gave her hand with an affectionate smile to Wickham, who followed his lady and wished them both joy, with an alacrity which showed no doubt of their happiness. Their reception from Mr. Bennet, to whom they then turned, was not quite so cordial. His countenance rather gained in austerity, and he scarcely opened his lips. The easy assurance of the young couple, indeed, was enough to provoke him. Elizabeth was disgusted, and even Miss Bennet was shocked. Lydia was Lydia still, untamed, unabashed, wild, noisy, and fearless. She turned from sister to sister, demanding their congratulations, and when at length they all sat down, looked eagerly around at the room, took notice of some little alteration in it, and observed with a laugh that it was a great while since she had been there. Wickham was not all more distressed than herself, but his manners were always so pleasing that, had his character and his marriage been exactly what they ought, his smiles and his easy address, while he claimed their relationship would have delighted them all. Elizabeth had not before believed him quite equal to such assurance, but she sat down, resolving within herself to draw no limits in future to the abundance of this impudent man. She blushed, and Jane blushed, but the cheeks of the two who caused their confusion suffered no variance in colour. There was no want of discourse. The bride and her mother could neither of them talk fast enough, and Wickham, who happened to sit near Elizabeth, began inquiring after his acquaintance in that neighbourhood, with good-humoured ease, which she felt very unable to equal in her replies. They seemed each of them to have the happiest memories in the world. Nothing of the past would recollect with pain, and Lydia led voluntarily to subjects which her sister would not have alluded for the world. "Only think of its been 3 months," she cried, "since I went away. It seems but a fortnight, I declare, and yet there have been things enough happened in the time. Good gracious! When I went away, I am sure I had no more idea of being married till I came back again. Though I thought I would be very fun if I was." Her father lifted up his eyes. Jane was distressed. Elizabeth looked expressively at Lydia, but she, who never heard or saw anything of which she chose to be insensible, gaily continued, "Oh, mamma, do the people hereabouts know I am married today? I am afraid they might not. And we overtook William Golding in his crucicle. I think that was a type of coach, I believe. So I was determined he should know of it, and so I let down the side glass next to him, and took off my glove, and let my hand rest upon the window frame, so that he might see the ring. And then I bowed and smiled like anything." Elizabeth could bear it no longer. She got up and ran out of the room, and returned no more, till she heard them passing through the hall of the dining parlour. She then joined them, soon enough to see Lydia, with anxious parade, walk up to her mother's right hand, and hear her say to her elder sister, "Ah, Jane, I take your place now, and you must go lower, because I am a married woman." Jesus Christ! "Ha-ha, eldest, I am now higher in the family hierarchy. I am married." It was not to be supposed that time would give Lydia that embarrassment from which she had been so wholly free at first. Her ease and good spirits increased. She longed to see Mrs. Phillips, the Lucases, and all their other neighbours, and to hear herself called Mrs. Wickham by each of them. And in the meantime, she went after dinner to show her ring, and boast of being married to Mrs. Hill and the other 2 housemaids. Look at me, sister. I am best girl now. "Well, mamma," she said, when they were all returned to the breakfast room, "and what do you think of my husband? Is not he a charming man? I am sure my sisters must all envy me. I only hope they have half my good luck. They must all go to Brighton. That is the place to get husbands. What a pity it is, mamma, we did not all go." "Very true. And if I had my will, we should. But, my dear Lydia, I don't all like your going such a way off. Must it be so? Lord, yes, there is nothing in that. I shall like it of all things. You and papa and my sisters must come down to see us. We shall be at Newcastle all in the winter, and I shall dare say there will be some balls, and I will take care to get a good partners for them all." "I should like that beyond anything," said her mother. "And then, when you go away, you may leave 1 or 2 of my sisters behind you. I dare say I shall get husbands for them before the winter is over." I thank you for my share of the favour, said Elizabeth, but I do not particularly like your way of getting husbands. Their visitors were not to remain above 10 days with them. Mr. Wickham had received his commission before he left London, and he was to join his regiment at the end of the fortnight. No one but Mrs. Bennet regretted that their stay would be so short, and she made the most of the time by visiting about with her daughter and having very frequent parties at home. These parties were acceptable to all. To avoid a family circle was even more desirable to such as did think than such as did not. To such as did think than such as did not. Sentences. English. Wickham's affection for Lydia was just what Elizabeth had expected to find. Not equal to Lydia's for him. She had secretly needed her present observation to be satisfied, from the reason of things that their elopement had been brought on by the strength of her love, rather than his, and she would have wondered why, without violently caring for her, he chose to elope with her at all. Had she not felt certain that his flight was rendered necessary by distress of circumstances, and if that were the case, he was not the young man to resist an opportunity of having companion. Lydia was exceedingly fond of him. He was her dear Wickham on every occasion. No one was to be put in competition with him. He did everything the best in the world, and she was sure he would kill more birds on the 1st of September than anyone else in the country. Did we have a tradition for murdering birds on the 1st of September? I did not know this. One morning, soon after their arrival, as she was sitting with her 2 elder sisters, she said to Elizabeth, "Lizzie, I never gave you an account of my wedding. I believe you were not by when I told Mamma, and the others all about it. Are you not curious to hear how it was managed?" "No, really," replied Elizabeth. "I think there cannot be too little said on the subject." "Ah, you are so strange! But I must tell you how it went off. We were married, you know, at St. Clement's, because Wickham's lodgings were in that parish, and it was settled that we should all be there by 11 o'clock. My uncle and aunt and I were to go together, and the others were to meet us at the church. Well, Monday morning came, and I was in such a fuss. I was so afraid, you know, that something would happen to put it off, and then I should have gone quite distracted. And there was my aunt. All the time I was dressing, preaching, and talking away, just as if she was reading a sermon. However, I did not hear above 1 word in 10, for I was thinking, you may suppose, of my dear Wickham. I longed to know whether he would be married in his blue coat. Well, and so we breakfasted, that's a new word, at 10, as usual. I thought it would never be over, for, by the by, you are to understand that my uncle and aunt were horrid unpleasant all the time I was with them. If you'll believe me, I did not once put my foot out of doors though I was there a fortnight. Not one party or scheme or anything. To be sure, London was rather thin, but, however, the little theatre was open. Well, and so, just as the carriage came to the door, my uncle was called away upon business to that horrid man, Mr. Stone. And then, you know, when once they get together, there was no end of it. Well, I was so frightened I did not know what to do, for my uncle was to give me away, and if we were beyond the hour we could not be married all day. But luckily he came back again in 10 minutes' time, and then we all set out. Now that is a teenage thing, isn't it? Oh, he was gone so long! It was only 10 minutes. However, I recollected afterwards that if he had been prevented going, the wedding need not be put off, for Mr. Darcy might have done as well. Mr. Darcy? Repeated Elizabeth in utter amazement. Yes, oh yes, he was to come there with Wickham, you know, but gracious me, I quite forgot. I ought not to have said a word about it. I promised them so faithfully. What will Wickham say? It was to be such a secret. Oh my. Mr. Darcy went to the wedding? If it was to be a secret, said Jane, say not another word on the subject. You may depend upon my seeking no further. Oh, certainly, said Elizabeth, though burning with curiosity. We will ask you no questions. Thank you, said Lydia, for if you did, I should certainly tell you all. Thank you for not asking questions on this secret, because I cannot keep a secret. If you asked me, I'd fucking tell you everything. I heard this is the first time the D&B effect came into play, where 1 minute is 1 hour to the observer. Correct! On such an encouragement to ask, Elizabeth was forced to put it out of her power by running away. Bless. I can't not ask. I can't not ask. Escape! 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 Very good way of dealing with it, Elizabeth. But to live in such ignorance on such a point was impossible, or at least it was impossible not to try for information. Mr. Darcy had been at her sister's wedding. It was exactly a scene, and exactly amongst people where he had apparently least to do, and least temptation to... Placing bets now. It wasn't the uncle that paid for Wickham's debts, it was Darcy. And Darcy did it so that Lydia wouldn't have to pay the price. Because he's doing it as a favour to Elizabeth. But he told Elizabeth's uncle to not tell his involvement in this at all. And it was Darcy that helped them find Lydia too. Oh, lordy. Classic Sundari move. He is the biggest son. It was exactly a scene and exactly among people where he had apparently least to do and least temptation to go. Conjectures as to the meaning of it, rapid and wild, hurried into her brain, but she was satisfied with none. Those that best pleased her, as placing his conduct in the noblest light, seemed most improbable. She could not bear such suspense, and hastily seizing a piece of paper, wrote a short letter to her aunt, to request an explanation of what Lydia had dropped, if it were compatible with secrecy which had been intended. You may readily comprehend, she added, what my curiosity must be to know how a person unconnected with any of us, and, comparatively speaking, a stranger to our family, should have been amongst you at such a time. Pray write instantly, and let me understand it, unless it is for very cogent reasons to remain secrecy, which Lydia seems to think necessary, and then I must endeavour to be satisfied with ignorance. Not that I shall, though, she added to herself, and finished the letter, and, my dear aunt, if you do not tell me in an honourable manner, I shall certainly be reduced to tricks and stratagems to find out. Yes, Elizabeth, do not be settled with secrets. Find the truth. Jane's delicate sense of honour would not allow her to speak to Elizabeth privately of what Lydia had let fall. Elizabeth was glad of it, till it appeared whether her inquiries would receive any satisfaction. She had rather be without a confidant. Ew! I love that pose. I am sure she did not listen. Elizabeth had the satisfaction of receiving her letter as soon as she possibly could. She was no sooner in the possession of it than hurrying to the little copse, where she was least likely to be interrupted. She sat down on one of the benches and prepared to be happy, for the length of the letter convinced her that it did not contain a denial. My dear niece, I have just received your letter, and I shall devote this whole morning to answering it, as I foresee a little writing will not compromise what I have to tell you. I must confess myself surprised by your application. I did not expect it from you. Don't think me angry, however, for I only mean to let you know that I had not imagined such inquiries to be expressed on your side. If you do not choose to understand me, forgive my impertinence. Your uncle is as much surprised as I am, and nothing but the belief of your being a party concerned would have allowed him to act as he has done. But if you are really innocent and ignorant, I must be more explicit. On the very day of my coming home from Longbourn, your uncle had a most unexpected visitor. Mr. Darcy called, and was shut up with him several hours. It was all over before I arrived, so my curiosity was not so dreadfully racked as yours seems to have been. He came to tell Mr. Gardiner that he had found out where your sister and Mr. Wickham were, and that he had seen and talked with them both, Wickham repeatedly, Lydia once. From what I can collect, he left Derbyshire only one day after ourselves, and came to town with the resolution of hunting for them. The motive professed was his conviction of its being owing to himself that Mr. Wickham's worthlessness had not been so well known as to make it impossible for any young woman of character to love or confide in him. He generously imputed the whole to his mistaken pride, and confessed that he had before thought it beneath him to lay his private actions open to the world. His character was to speak for itself. He called it, therefore, his duty to step forward and endeavour to remedy an evil which had been brought on by himself. Yes, totally not because he likes Elizabeth and wants to help her sister or anything. Baka! Imagine spending an entire morning on a letter and not 3 whole weeks like normal. If he had another motive, I am sure it would never disgrace him. He had been some days in town before he was able to discover them, but he had something to direct his search, which was more than we had, and the consciousness of this was another reason for his resolving to follow us. There is a lady, it seems, a Mrs. Young, who was some time ago a governess to Miss Darcy, and was dismissed from her charge on some cause of disprobation, though he did not say what. She then took a large house in Edward Street, and has since maintained herself by letting lodgings. This Mrs. Young was, he knew, intimately acquainted with Wickham, and he went to her for intelligence of him as soon as he got to town, but it was 2 or 3 days before he could get from her what he wanted. She would not betray her trust, I suppose, without bribery and corruption, for she really did not know where her friend was to be found. Wickham indeed had gone to her on first arrival in London, and had she been able to receive them into her house, they would have taken up their abode with her. At length, however, our kind friend procured the wished-for direction. They were in so-and-so street. He saw Wickham, and afterwards insisted on seeing Lydia. His first object with her, he acknowledged, had been to persuade her to quit her present disgraceful situation, and return to her friends as soon as they could be prevailed on to receive her, offering his assistance as far as it would go. But he found Lydia absolutely resolved on remaining where she was. She cared for none of her friends. She wanted no help of his. She would not hear of leaving Wickham. She was sure they should be married some time or other, and it did not much signify when, since such were her feelings. It only remained, he thought, to secure and expedite a marriage which, in his very first conversation with Wickham, he easily learned had never been his design. He confessed himself obliged to leave the regiment on account of some debts of honour which were very pressing, and scrupled not to lay all the ill consequences of Lydia's flight on her own folly alone. He meant to resign his commission immediately, and as to his future situation, he could conjecture very little about it. He must go somewhere, but he did not know where, and he knew he should have nothing to live on. Mr. Darcy asked why he did not marry your sister at once. Though Mr. Bennet was not imagined to be very rich, he would have been able to do something for him, and his situation must have been benefited by marriage. But he found, in reply to his question, that Wickham still cherished the hope of more effectually making his fortune by marriage in some other country. Damn, so Wickham didn't marry her straight away because he was like, I could find someone richer. God damn, Wickham. Lydia, you poor sweet girl. So head over heels for this absolute piece of shit. Under such circumstances, however, he was not likely to be proof against the temptation of immediate relief. They met several times, for there was much to be discussed. Wickham, of course, wanted more than he could get, but at length was reduced to be more reasonable. Everything being settled between them, Mr. Darcy's next step was to make your uncle acquainted with it, and he first called in Gracechurch Street in the evening before I came home, but Mr. Gardiner could not be seen, and Mr. Darcy found on further inquiry that your father was still with him, but would quit town the next morning. He did not judge your father to be a person whom he could properly consult as your uncle, and therefore readily postponed seeing him until after the departure of the former. Mr. Wickham is a butthead. Waifu PNGs don't fund themselves. You gotta marry the 3D waifus to get money for the 2D waifus. He did not leave his name until the next day. It was only known that a gentleman had called on business. On Saturday he came again. Your father was gone, your uncle at home, and, as I said before, they had a great deal to talk together. They met again on Sunday, and then I saw him too. It was not all settled before Monday. As soon as it was, the express was sent off to Longbourn. But our visitor was very obstinate. I fancy, Lizzie, that obstinacy is the real defect of his character after all. He has been accused of many faults at different times, but this is the true one. Nothing was to be done that he did not do himself. Though I am sure, and I do not speak it to be thanked, therefore say nothing about it, your uncle would most readily have settled the whole. They battled it out together for a long time, which was more than either the gentleman or lady concerned in it deserved. But at last your uncle was forced to yield, and instead of being allowed to be the one of use to his niece, was forced to put up with only having the probable credit of it, which went sorely against the grain. I really believe your letter this morning gave him great pleasure, because it required an explanation that would rob him of his borrowed feathers, and give the praise. My A in autistic. Thank you for subscribing! Really appreciate it. Thank you! Yeah. Where was I? I got distracted by bleeps. And give the praise where it is due. But Lizzie, it must go no further than yourself, or Jane at most. You know pretty well, I suppose, that what has been done for the young people. His debts are to be paid, amounting, I believe, to considerably more than £1,000, another 1,000 in addition to her own settled upon her, and his commission purchased. The reason why all this was to be done by him alone was such I have given above. It was owing to him, to his reserve and want of proper consideration, that Wickham's character had been so misunderstood, and consequently that he had been received and nothing as he was. Perhaps there was some truth in this, though I doubt whether his reserve or anybody's reserve can be answerable for the event. But in spite of all this fine talking, my dear Lizzie, you may rest perfectly assured that your uncle would never have yielded, if we had not given him credit for another interest in the affair. When all this was resolved on, he returned again to his friends, who were still staying at Pemberley, but it was agreed that he should be in London once more when the wedding took place, and all money matters were then to receive the last finish. I believe that I have now told you everything. It is a relation which you tell me is to give you great surprise. I hope at least it will not afford you any displeasure. Lydia came to us, and Wickham had constant admission to the house. He was exactly what he had been when I knew him in Hertfordshire, but I would not tell you how little I was satisfied with her behaviour while she stayed with us, if I had not perceived by Jane's letter last Wednesday that her conduct on coming home was exactly a piece with it, and therefore what I now tell you can give you no fresh pain. I talked to her repeatedly in the most serious manner, representing to her the wickedness of what she had done, and all the unhappiness she had brought on her family. If she heard me, it was by good luck, for I am sure she did not listen. I was sometimes quite provoked, but when I recollected my dear Elizabeth and Jane, and for their sakes had patience with her, Mr. Darcy was punctual in his return, and, as Lydia informed you, attended the wedding. He dined with us the next day, and was to leave town again on Wednesday or Thursday. Will you be very angry with me, my dear Lizzie, if I take the opportunity of saying what I was never bold enough to say before, how much I like him? His behaviour to us has, in every respect, been as pleasing as when we were in Derbyshire. His understanding and opinions all please me. He wants nothing but a little more liveliness, and that, if he married prudently, his wife may teach him. I thought him very sly. He hardly ever mentioned your name, but slyness seems the fashion. Pray forgive me if I have been very presuming, or at least do not punish me so far as to exclude me from P. I shall never be quite happy till I have been all around the park. I fain with a nice little pair of ponies would be the very thing, but I must write no more. The children have been wanting me for this half hour. But niece, I must say, fucking marry him. He's a good un. Do it. Take him now. The best wingman, M. Gardner. It's kind of hard to misunderstand 10 grand in gambling debt. Yeah, it really is. Like, even if Darcy pays that off now for them, then he's gonna get himself into that gambling debt later on in their life regardless. Lydia's just blind to it, the poor girl. She's just like, I'm getting married and he's so pretty, and not realizing that she's not in for a good time at all. Poor girl. Poor girl. The contents of this letter threw Elizabeth into a flutter of spirits, in which was difficult to determine. With pleasure or pain bore the greatest share. The vague and unsettled suspicion which uncertainly had produced of what Mr. Darcy might have been doing to forward her sister's match, which she had feared to encourage, as to the exertion of goodness too great to be probable, and at the same time dreaded to be just from the pain of obligation, were proved beyond their greatest extent to be true. He had followed them purposely to town. He had taken on himself all the trouble and mortification attending on such a research, in which supplication had been necessary to a woman whom he must abominate and despise, and where he was reduced to frequently meet, reason with, persuade, and finally bribe the man who he always wished to avoid, and worse, whose very name it was punishment for him to pronounce. He had done all this for a girl whom he could neither regard nor esteem. Her heart did whisper that he had done it for her, but it was a hope shortly checked by other considerations, and soon she felt that even her vanity was insufficient, when required to depend upon his affection for her, for a woman who had already refused him, as able to overcome a sentiment so natural as abhorrence against a relationship with Wickham, brother-in-law of Wickham. Every kind of pride must revolt from the connection. He had, to be sure, done much. She was ashamed to think of how much, but he had given a reason for his interference, which asked no extraordinary stretch of belief. It was reasonable that he should feel he had been wrong. He had liberty. He had the meaning of exercising it, and though she would not place herself as his principal inducement, she could perhaps believe that remaining partially for her might assist his endeavours in a cause where her peace of mind must be naturally concerned. It was painful, exceedingly painful, to know they were under obligations to a person who could never receive a return. They owed the restoration of Lydia, her character, everything to him. Oh, how heartily did she grieve over every ungracious sensation she had ever encouraged, every saucy speech she had ever directed towards him. But he loves your saucy speech! For herself she was humbled, but she was proud of him. Proud that in a cause of compassion and honour he had been able to get the better of himself. She read over her aunt's commendation of him again and again. It was hardly enough, but it pleased her. She was even sensible of some pleasure, though mixed with regret, on finding how steadfast both she and her uncle had been persuaded that affection and confidence subsided between Mr. Darcy and herself. He loves your sauce, girl, he do! She was roused from her seat and her reflections by someone's approach, and before she could strike into another path, she was overtaken by Wickham. "I'm afraid I interrupt your solitary ramble, my dear sister," said he as he joined her. "You certainly do," she replied with a smile, "but it does not follow that the interruption must be unwelcome. I should be sorry indeed if it were. We were always good friends, and now we are better. True. Are the others coming out?" "I do not know. Mrs. Bennet and Lydia are going in the carriage to Merton. And so, my dear sister, I find from our uncle and aunt that you have actually seen Pemberley." How much more do we have? Because we have gone way over that 20-minute mark. The 2-hour mark even. Oh, not too much. She replied in affirmative. "I almost envy the pleasure, and yet I believe it would be too much for me, or else I could take it in my way to Newcastle. And I saw the old housekeeper, I suppose, poor Reynolds. She was always very fond of me, but of course she did not mention my name to you." "Yes, she did. And what did she say?" "That you were gone into the army, and she was afraid had not turned out well, at such a distance as that. You know, things are strangely misrepresented." "Certainly," he replied, biting his lips. Elizabeth hoped she had silenced him, but he soon afterwards said, I was surprised to see Darcy in town last month. We passed each other several times. I wondered what he can be doing here. Perhaps preparing for his marriage with Miss de Burgh, said Elizabeth. It must be something particular to take him there at this time of year. Undoubtedly. Did you see him while you were at Lambton? I thought I understood from the gardeners that you had. Yes, he introduced us to his sister. And do you like her? Very much. I have heard, indeed, that she is uncommonly improved within this year or two. When I last saw her, she was not very promising. I am glad you liked her. I hope she will turn out well. I dare say she will. She has got over the most trying age. Did you go by the village of Crimpton? I do not recollect that we did. I mention it because it is the living place which I ought to have had. A most delightful place, excellent parsonage house. It would have suited me in every respect. How should you have liked making sermons? Exceedingly well. I should have considered it as part of my duty. An exertion would soon have been nothing. One ought to repine, but, to be sure, it would have been such a thing for me. The quiet retirement of such a life would have answered all my ideas of happiness. But it was not to be. Did you ever hear Darcy mention the circumstances when you were in Kent? I have heard from authority, which I thought as good, that it was left you conditionally only, and at the will of the present patron. You have! Yes, there was something in that. I told you so from the first. You may remember I did hear, too, that there was a time when sermon-making was not so palatable to you as it seemed at present, that you actually declared your resolution on never taking orders, and that the business had been compromised accordingly. You did, and it was not wholly without foundation. You may remember what I told you on that point, when we first talked about it. They were now almost at the door of the house, for she had walked fast to get rid of him, and unwilling, for her sister's sake, to provoke him, she only said in reply, with good-humoured smile, "Come, Mr. Wickham. We are brother and sister, you know. Do not let us quarrel about the past. In future, I hope we shall be always of one mind." She held out her hand. He kissed it with affectionate gallantry, though he hardly knew how to look, and they entered the house. And with that, we will need to end the stream. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you to anyone who looked. Thank you to anyone who chatted. And thank you to anyone who watches the VOD. Oh, God. I had a break. Come on. I'm still getting back used to my own streaming shite. However, next week, despite the potato form, I should be back at full power and full streaming capabilities. I will be back tomorrow, and we'll do some game dev. The game is going pretty well. Obviously, I've done all the writing now, so it's 58 endings in total. I've done well over 100 voice lines, and we'll continue doing those tomorrow. And hopefully, I'm hoping the last week of October we can get it out, because if I can get the lines done this week, then next week we'll be looking at playtesting, and then week after that it'll be out, hopefully, maybe. Yeah, so I'll be back to full streaming capacity. I will also be researching how to get my normal form back and get out of being a potato. And that is all. I don't think I have anything else to tell you, other than, if you have not already, I would highly appreciate it if you are on YouTube, if you could leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you are on Twitch, if you could give the channel a cheeky follow. Cheeky follow. Why is it cheeky to be on Twitch and follow and not cheeky on YouTube? I don't know. You make it up. If you would like to support me in this channel and in making sure that I pay bills and things like that, I do have jobs, but I would like this to be my only job one day. You can do that a number of ways. You can do that via YouTube membership, so I can get emotes, exclusive streams, a Discord channel, and merch discounts. You can do that via the Patreon, where you get basically all those things, but you also get a short story every month and free books. I should also say that the members and the Patreons will get my game free of charge, because they already give me enough money. It's the least I could do. And then there is the Kofi, where you don't really get anything for subscribing there, but I really appreciate the people who do because I get better rates. There's also the audiobooks in the shop, and there are emote commissions. If you like my pretty cute emotes, then you can get me to draw some for you if you would like them for your channel or Discords or whatever you want them for. And last but not least, there is my merch store, where you can get ebooks, first edition copies of books I've written, bookmarks, keyrings, t-shirts, a notebook, stickers, and a pillow. I will be back tomorrow. I will see you then. For now, have a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, day, night, whatever it is, wherever you are. I will see you tomorrow. I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Brownie Rose Smith, live in the Forbidden Library. Oh, another one! Another subscriber. The cheese? Oh, that would be great for the potato. Thank you. I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Brownie Rose Smith, live in the Forbidden Library. Goodbye.